Hello Mustang Nation, welcome to Meadowlark Middle School. My name is Mr. Dharmaraj, but you can call me Mr. D. I am your orchestra teacher. I want to encourage you to sign up for a music class, and if you sign up for music, please consider joining the orchestra program here at Meadowlark. In orchestra, you can get an opportunity to choose a string instrument to learn how to play. There are 4 choices, so let me introduce each one of them. First instrument that we have is our smallest member of the string family. This instrument is called the violin. The violin tends to be a high-sounding instrument, and it has quite a few high notes. Let me demonstrate so you can hear what the violin sounds like in its high register. This is called the E string. And that's the highest sound that the violin can play without putting fingers down. If I put my fingers down, I can even go higher in pitch. It's kind of like birds chirping in the trees. So the violin tends to play high notes because it's a small instrument. But it does have some low notes. Here's the low sound on the violin. That's called a G. That note is fairly singable. It's in most people's voice ranges, and it's a moderately low. So I mean, it's not very low, but it's got a different sound than that E string I just played. So let me play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, a song that all of us hopefully know, so you can kind of hear the violin in its high sounds. You can see the violin has a nice, loud, brilliant sound in the high register. But let's meet our next instrument. The next instrument looks like a violin, but if you put them together, you can see that it's bigger. This one right here is bigger, and this one has a different name. This is called the viola. The viola is often considered a big brother or big sister or a big cousin to the violin. They play almost exactly the same way, but there is one note, or one string I should say, that is lower sounding than the violin. So let me play that low string that you heard on the violin, which is called the G string. The viola has that string, and the viola can play 5 notes lower. Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's your lowest sounding viola string. So it's not exactly the same range, but it's more of the singing and speaking range of most people. And the viola has more of a warm sound. Let's hear Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on the viola. It's not as high as the violins, but it's got a beautiful, warm sound. Viola is really wonderful for singing. Okay, let's move on. So, guess what? We're going to have a bigger instrument. And our next instrument in the family is called the cello. The cello is so big that we have to use a metal pin on the bottom of the instruments to pull it out to help us hold it up. So you put that on the floor, because it's kind of heavy. And the thing with cello is you always have to sit in a chair to play this instrument. You can play the violin and viola standing, but the cello, it's kind of hard to play standing, so you always have to have a chair. And it's going to have a lower sound. So remember that viola sound that we heard? Well, here's that same viola note on the cello. The cello has 8 notes lower than the viola. Let's count together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And there's the lowest cello note. It's much lower than the viola. Definitely a lower sound. And maybe some people think it's louder. I don't know, they're all about the same. But the cello definitely has a warm, deep sound. Kind of like maybe your father or dad or a male adult singing in a low register. So the cello can also play Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star in its low register. Let's listen to that. So there you go, a much lower sounding version of Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star. But guess what, boys and girls? This is not the biggest or lowest sounding instrument in the string family. I bet you can see right here on the side, off over my shoulder, we've got an even bigger one. And this instrument right here is called the double bass. The reason we call it the double bass is because the biggest bass is actually twice as big as the cello. That's why we call it double bass. But most people just call it bass because it's simpler and easier. So if you want to play the bass, let's meet this big, huge instrument. This instrument right here happens to be a little bit smaller bass because obviously, as a 6th grader, I don't expect you to be able to play the full-size bass because that's huge. It's like 7 feet tall. That's really big even for me. So thank goodness they make smaller bass sizes so that 6th graders like yourselves coming up soon can have a chance to play this big bass. So let's listen to the bass. I bet you may have heard this before. Tell me if you recognize this. All right, a little bit of drama. So most people recognize that as being music from the movie Jaws. Jaws was a famous movie that was put out a long time ago. It's about a shark. I think many of you probably have heard it. And every time we play the bass, students always want to hear the Jaws theme. So that's always fun. The bass can play a lot of other things too. The neat thing about the bass is that you notice this thing right here that I've been using on all these instruments? This is called a bow. And we use the bow to play the strings. It makes the strings vibrate. That means they wiggle really fast. And then the music bounces around inside the body, which is a hollow wooden box. And then these big holes that you see right here on these instruments, these are called the F holes. The music bounces around inside the box and it pops out of those, and that's how we hear the sound. But the neat thing about these instruments, and especially with the bass, is you can also just use your fingers. By using your fingers, we can pluck the strings, kind of like a guitar. A guitar doesn't use a bow to play, but we can kind of play like a guitar by plucking, and the fancy word we use for that is called pizzicato. Everyone say pizzicato with an Italian accent, like if you're watching a pizza commercial. Pizzicato, because the words we use in music are all Italian words. So you get to learn not only to play really cool instruments, you get to learn some Italian words. Let's listen to the bass while I'm plucking the strings. So as you can see, when you pluck the bass, it reminds me of a style of music known as jazz. And the bass is famous for playing jazz music. And that's a lot of fun. All of these instruments, the violin, viola, and cello, can also play with their fingers plucking and can also play jazz. But the bass is most famous for that. And that's why I love to show you how it can be plucked. The first thing you're going to learn, if you choose either one of these instruments, is you're going to learn how to pluck the strings before you learn how to hold and use the bow. The bow, by the way, if you're wondering what this white stuff is, it's not string. This is horsehair. Horsehair from the tail of a horse. No one killed or hurt a horse. None of that happens. They just give the horse a little haircut, and then we use the horsehair to help us because the horsehair has little microscopic ridges that pull the strings in order for the strings to vibrate and wiggle and make the sound. And that's how and why we use the bow. All right, boys and girls, so there you go. Those are your 4 choices. And don't forget, when you choose a music class, orchestra, please put it down. I'd love to see you and join the Meadowlark Middle School Orchestra program and becoming a member of Mustang Nation here at Meadowlark. Take care, and I'll hope to see you in the fall. Bye-bye.